Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the justBernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the justBernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We've got another wonderful interview for you this afternoon. We're going to be speaking with Anodea Judith in just a few moments. But first of all, let me welcome our Assistant Director, Trevor Knott, who's joining me from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hi, Trevor. How are you?
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
We missed you last week.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for manning the chat room for us last week.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, how have you been, Trevor? I haven't had a chance to talk to you very much this week. How is everything going for you up there?
It's going well. Just making my way through this crazy shift, just like the rest of us.
Yeah. Tell me about it. And we're going to be talking more about that shift, of course, with Anodea Judith in just a moment. I just wanted to let everybody know and thank everybody, by the way. We had an amazing marathon broadcast this last week on our G.I.C. TV live stream on a Saturday. And we had Roxy Lopez, we had Terry Joyce, we had Derwin Sherwood, Isaac Holt, James Wickus, and of course Trevor was on the chat later on in the night. Unfortunately, he wasn't available during the day, but we did some really amazing work. We were able to literally speak with, for the first time, and I'm glad to say that we were able to interview one of our administrators, and we discovered he's an indigo, and what an amazing young man that we are working with. That we didn't realize he was so talented. So we are very grateful. We'll be putting out the video clips of the highlights, at least, of this last weekend's 12-hour broadcast, and of course all the interviews as well. Please remember that the Contradiction series by Roxy Lopez and myself was filmed that afternoon, and we will begin releasing each episode weekly beginning in November. It was a fantastic, we had a fantastic job filming. The discussions were amazing. Roxy Lopez, of course, is amazing, and I thoroughly enjoy working with her all the time. Such a professional. Anyway, with that being said, keep an eye out for Contradiction coming to our YouTube channels, mine and Roxy's, beginning in November. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about Anodea Judith. We were lucky enough to have her on several months ago, and she's been kind enough to agree to come back on. Anodea Judith is a world-renowned teacher and best-selling author who has been called a prophet of our time with a Masters and Doctorate in psychology and healing. She has been a lifelong student of history, mythology, comparative religion, yoga, sociology, and politics. She is best known for her groundbreaking works bridging Eastern disciplines with Western psychology through her classic books, Wheels of Life and Eastern Body, Western Mind. She has created an award-winning DVD, The Illuminated Chakras, which is one of my favorites, and I know many of you have seen it, and an empowering manual for manifestation, creating on purpose. Her newest book is on social evolution, The Global Heart Awakens, Humanity's Rite of Passage from the Love of Power to the Power of Love. So without further ado, welcome Anodea Judith to the justBernard Show. It's great to have you back.
Good morning, Bernard. Just delighted to be here.
Well, we're so delighted to have you again as well. I just want to say that we had a lot of people very excited about you coming on. I guess they forgot you were on already a few months ago, so this gives them a second chance to to listen to all the wonderful discussion that we're going to have today. And with that being said, we it was funny because Eileen Dunn had contacted me just after the they decided to close the government, and she's like, "This is
yeah.
a really good time to have Anodea Judith on."
Yep.
So why don't we start there? What is going on? What do you see is going on? What are your feelings on the idea that they have literally are holding our government and their services? As far as I'm concerned, I see it as being held hostage. And it's funny how they picked and choose what they're allowing, what they're not allowing. And, it's really insane. So what are your thoughts on all of this that's going on, and why now?
Well, in the book I talk about humanity's rite of passage from the love of power to the power of love, and that is a process of maturing from our adolescence to our adulthood. What we're seeing in the government right now is adolescent, to say the best. It's very immature. It's like a playground fight, almost elementary school in some ways, but it's really a power play, and I think everybody knows that. And so we are moving from competition to collaboration. And the longer this plays out, the more the people, the citizens, are clamoring for, come on, guys, let's just work together. Cooperate, will you? Collaborate, will you? And the longer something draws out, the more it saturates the public. And I think that that's an important process. Part of the growing up process is losing faith in the authorities that, adolescents lose faith in their parents when they become adolescent. And that's part of the growing up process. They say, oh my God, Dad's drunk, and I've got to take on the responsibility myself. So I think as people lose their faith in government, we are taking responsibility into our own hands. It's part of the process. And it's quite a spectacle we're watching. I never thought I'd see such a thing.
Yeah, you can say that again. I can't help but agree with you so much, 100%. I remember the days leading up to it, how everyone was so worried, what happens if the government shuts down? What happens if we don't have this, we don't have that? And I couldn't help but react in the way, kind of like what you're saying. This gives us now an opportunity to show that we can take care of ourselves, that we can take care of each other. I've seen images, on Facebook and other social media of volunteers just coming out and cleaning the national parks themselves, of people
exactly.
helping each other. So it's kind of, I don't know how negative it is. I know there are negative reactions, and I know that there might be in the long run maybe certain issues on a day-to-day basis that people might find a negative, but it could really be an opportunity for growth.
It absolutely can, and I think it's actually moving things forward, even in its obstructionism, in that people are getting really fed up with this kind of competition and power play. It's really part of the dying of the power paradigm. And, in the past, such a power play probably would have worked because they didn't have the means to poll so many people and say, the Republican Party is at its lowest ratings in years, and, that we have this instantaneous feedback system now where the public actually is getting to vote on this matter.
Yes, absolutely. Hear. And it just seems to be, well, from what I've been observing as far as reading alternative media, not necessarily mainstream media, but the alternative media seem to be showing, again, what I just said a little bit earlier, how people are coming together. And you won't see that in the mainstream media, unfortunately. You won't see how people are, whether it be the truckers that are, protesting, or whether it be, like the men that are cleaning up the parks, or those that are just ignoring the fact that, well, here's something that I find very interesting, and I have to admit this kind of irked me to an extent as a South Floridian. I grew up in South Florida, and Biscayne National Park was very much a part of my life growing up. And they literally had the Coast Guard surrounding it and not letting people use it over the holiday weekend. And I just wonder how long it's going to be till all the boats start surrounding the Coast Guard and say,
"That's right, that's right."
Regatta protest.
Yeah. There's an interesting book. I know we're here to talk about my book, but there's another interesting book by another author, Moises Haim, called The End of Power. And in that book, he talks about the four main kinds of power: religious power, political power, military power, and economic power, and how all four of them are failing to be able to do what they used to do. They just don't, people are rebelling. There's, the religious power is getting undermined by the fact that we know priests molest children, and, that's changing. The economic power isn't quite holding the way it used to. We have the Occupy movement. The political power isn't holding. You can look at what's happening in Egypt. There was the uprising, and they had a government in there for a year, and they couldn't hold on to the power. And so this is part of the end of the power era that is forcing a new way of organizing human society, which is a much more cooperative, egalitarian kind of organization. It's happening through the people. As people realize the government is not taking care of what's vital, which is the environment, the economy, the peace process, employment, the preservation of democracy, as we realize that's not happening as much as it should from our government, people are taking that into their own hands with non-governmental organizations all over the world. And some say that that is the movement, and the largest movement of humanity today into these non-governmental organizations. So you see all over that the failure of government is, in a sense, handing power to the people, but they're doing it in a different way.
Yeah. And if I may just make, a sub-context about the Egyptian uprising, we had someone on the show last week who lives in Giza, and we were actually discussing archaeology, but somehow we moved into the Egyptian uprising. And she was saying how, again, the mainstream media versus alternative media, how mainstream media portrayed the Egyptians as being very happy with this new government that basically we had installed last year. And honestly, they were completely against it, and they were more than happy to get rid of it this year. They did not want the the Muslim Brotherhood or I forgot the guy's name. It's already not Morsi. Was it Morsi?
Yeah, Morsi they were throwing out. Yeah, but then the Muslim Brotherhood came in, and that wasn't working either.
Right. So they were just very unhappy with that, and if anything, it kind of proved a point that even with the influence of, let's say, the West or the American Empire trying to install a different government, that it just didn't work. It didn't take. And it's very inspiring that they saw through it and they went ahead and decided that they're not going to have it. But again, that was just a side note. In reference to your book, you talk about something that you call the organizing principle. What is the organizing principle?
Well, this is a question, Bernard, that I sat with for really a good year, asking every day in my meditation as I was working on the book, what is the next organizing principle for humanity? So for the past 5,000 years, we have been organized by a top-down authority. And if you think back to when we were, cultural young children, and we were living in cities of 100,000 people with none of the technology that we take for granted today. No motorized transport, no cell phones, no newspapers, no radio stations, and, people couldn't read and they didn't really know much about the world. How did that society get organized? By someone on top who was a strong ruler, who could make his word known and have that word resolute to be handed down, When you think about the Roman Empire, for example, that had to travel a great distance, and there was no instantaneous communication. So there had to be absolutely ironclad obedience. And that was what kept society in order and organized everything from the division of labor to economics to the flow of goods. And we've been in that organizing principle for about 5,000 years. But in the meantime, the average person has been growing up. Humanity has been growing up. Now we can read and write. Now we have, the world's entire body of information at our fingertips on the internet. We have tools of our own power to go where we want and say where we want and publish and organize. And so we have been, in a sense, growing up. Now that top-down authority organizing principle, as society has gotten more complex, is really inefficient for the task. It just can't do it. And even if you elect somebody good and get them into office, you quickly see that you get disappointed that they can't do much either. And again, we need a new organizing principle for how do we get things done? How do we organize society to be peaceful and cooperative? And so I talk about the heart being, and I work with the chakras, the heart being the next center above the power chakra, which is the third chakra, as representing the next organizing principle: collaboration, cooperation, a web of connection rather than a chain of command, moving from greed to green, moving from empire to an earth community, from procreation to co-creation. And I have a number of these listed in the book. These are really changes in values, changes in structure. And it's huge, this shift.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, I feel that, and I thank you so much for breaking it down for everybody, because what I find is that many people, especially who are involved in either political activism or in, how shall we say, New Thought spirituality, New Age spirituality, light worker, et cetera, that many believe that it's kind of like going to happen one day. Like we wake up one day and the shift occurred, or one day we wake up and the elites have collapsed and they're all being arrested. And I like that you've broken it down, that it's through us that we're creating the many layers of this new way of living, what I like to call the new paradigm. And it's not just government, it's not just spirituality, it's community, it's how our food, it's our media, it's everything that we've had in the old paradigm, but recreated to be more egalitarian, I guess would be the right way. Is that kind of what you're sensing as well?
Yeah, actually, it's a change in every facet of our civilization. Government, economics, healthcare, education, religion, agriculture, energy, manufacturing. Every aspect is up for this shift. And so it's huge, and it's not going to happen in one day. In fact, so much of it has started already. It's a change in consciousness. We've had this huge consciousness movement. That's part of it. It's people changing themselves, changing their relationships, changing their workplace. And it happens not from a top-down dictate that says, okay, everybody, we're going to do this. It happens from a growing realization that the old ways don't work and that we are evolving, and evolution requires change. And so it's to say, well, what are we evolving into? What is calling us into the future? What will be sustainable? And we ask that in our own lives. We ask that in our business lives, and in universities, everywhere, because this change is coming under this new paradigm. And so the short way that I'm saying it is we're moving from the love of power to the power of love as an organizing principle. Mm-hmm. And we're moving from our adolescence to a planetary adulthood as a species.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for encompassing all aspects of our lives. And the reason why I say that is there are just so many of us, and I was one, let's say 7 years ago, 6 years ago, where there was anything involving the old paradigm, I didn't want anything to do with it. Universities, I thought were evil. Any type of organization to me was evil and hierarchical or whatnot. So, as I began to evolve and I began to see that it's not the fact that, let's say, the food system is evil or the school education system is evil, or for that matter, the government is evil. It's how it has it has evolved into is not necessarily for the benefit of mankind, but we can still use the basis of those, how should we say, organizational structures and utilize them to be more encompassing, to be more compassionate, and just use them in a smarter way for everybody. What are your feelings?
Exactly.
I was going to say, what do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I talk in the book about how in the movement from power to love, we don't give up our power to get to love. Instead, we stand in it. And, the institutions that exist, rather than evil, I would say they're becoming outdated. They really served their purpose at a time when that was the only way we could do it. And, just like everybody discovers as they go from childhood to adulthood that the defense strategies we used in our dysfunctional families work against us in adult relationships. And, in the same way, the defense strategies and the organizational strategies we used once upon a time are now in our way. And but yet we can use those to stand in it, to take it to a higher level. I quote Martin Luther King in this, in that he said, what is the realization is that power without love is reckless and abusive, but love without power is sentimental and anemic. And I would add, this is why some of the progressive movement is not more effective, because we give up our power. Martin Luther King goes on to say, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So we need to, the corporate structure, for example, is very efficient at getting things done. The trouble is the corporate mentality is not dedicated to sustainability. It's not dedicated to anything sacred. It's generally not dedicated to the good of the people that work there, though that's changing. Mm-hmm. And so, but the structure itself is very effective, so we can use that, but we need to use it for a higher purpose.
Absolutely. I couldn't help but think about, I just ordered something from the Orient, and I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, who organized the mail system or the postal service? What a magnificent structure that is, that I can order something from the East and it can be here in a week. And mm-hmm. What if we didn't have that? And how would it shut down our society if we didn't have something like that? Now, of course, the government is trying to shut down the postal service right now. It's a matter of fact. Right. As a matter of fact, there's a huge local situation going on where they're trying to. They've shut down several postal processing areas or facilities here in my town, and so it seems to be on at the front of everyone's consciousness. So, it, like I said, it made me think, what an amazing structure. And just like you said, the corporation is very efficient. Unfortunately, the ones who are running it only see one thing, that it must create profit. And what I love about it, in a very non-compassionate way, more in a comical way, is that it needs to grow, and the numbers have to get higher and higher and higher every quarter. But in the meantime, it's destroying the environment. It's raising prices. It's not for the greater good, as you were mentioning earlier. But again, what a magnificent thing that we can, distribute. Let's say somebody comes up with a wonderful, even a T-shirt that becomes very popular. Through the corporation process, you can distribute it around the world.
Absolutely. It's almost like in Star Trek when they used to say, computer, send me a, such and such, and it would appear. Well, I can go to my computer and say, go Google something and say, Give me a mohair sweater or something, and it can be here in a couple days. It's just not instantaneous yet. But yeah, this structure has created everything that we kind of take for granted: the roads, the trains, the postal system, the production of computers and cell phones that allow us to connect, the production of automobiles, the whole transportation system, the whole substructure of society has been created by this top-down, organizing principle. The thing is, we're getting to a place where we don't need more of that. We don't need more roads. The infrastructure is largely created so that we can become a global organization. It needs to be maintained, and we know that, bridges and highways are not being maintained as well. But we don't need more of it. Instead, we need to say, okay, we've been given all this. For what purpose? Has, our ancestors labored putting in the railroads. We don't have to do that. The highways were put in. We don't have to do that.
Right.
For what purpose? And my answer to that question is so that we have the tools and the power to create heaven on earth.
I agree.
And we'll create that together.
Thank you, Anodea. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, we're going to continue our discussion with Anodea Judith and on her wonderful new book, The Global Heart Awakens. As you know, we are here every Tuesday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are having a wonderful conversation with Anodea Judith on how the Global Heart Awakens, which happens to be the name of her new book. Now, Anodea, one of the things that I really love about your book, and I feel that it's very important for all of us to understand these particular principles. While as a spiritual being, I understand that, or as a conscious being, I feel it's very important to remain grounded in the moment, but I feel intellectually as a species, the human species, that we also have to understand where we were, where we are, where we're going. And your book does a wonderful way of sharing and expressing these very essential questions. Who we are, where do we come from, where are we going. So can you share with our audience a bit of what you shared in your book as to where do we come from? Or who are we? I'm sorry. Let's start with the first question. Who are we?
Yeah, well, these are the three essential questions asked by any myth. And so as we're, designing a new myth to lead humanity into the future, we have to answer these questions. So who are we? I believe we are the most incredible species to have ever arrived on this planet, the first species capable of also harming the planet, the first ones to realize that, first ones to be able to do something about that, and the first ones even to realize that those tiny points of light out in the night sky are actually distant galaxies that we have not even begun to explore. And so we are a species on our way to becoming almost of godlike proportions. We have the power on a planetary scale to change the climate, to change the gene pool, to blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons. These are powers of creation and destruction on a godlike scale, but we don't yet have the wisdom to handle those powers in a wise and sustainable way. So we are a species entering our initiation, our planetary initiation into our future adulthood. And that's who we are at this time. Now, should I keep going?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, so where we've come from is very important to understand because, to get to the future, we have to heal some of the wounds of the past. And I know this as a therapist. If somebody is stuck in their life, if they're in crisis, we have to not only mitigate the crisis, but we have to look back and say, well, how'd you get into this mess in the first place? Oh, you didn't have a mother. Your father was distant. You fought with your brothers. Of course, this is all true of Western civilization. And so when we look back to the past, we realize that our first primal connection was with the Mother Earth, and that as we progressed into our early toddlerhood, if you would say, we went into our terrible twos and rejected everything, rebelled against the Mother in every way, plowed her under, and said, no, the new society is of heaven, not earth, is of mind, not body, is of masculine, not feminine. And so we created a division that has now escalated into a complete separation, into a complete alienation, if you will. And so our denial of the earth, the body, and all of that has created, healthcare crisis, economic crisis, environmental crisis. And now we're coming back to an age of reunion where we're saying, oh, it's not just about the mind, but it's about the body as well. It's not just about some otherworldly place going to heaven and the hereafter. It's about taking care of the planet we live on right here and right now so that it's, we can create heaven on earth. So this era of the heart is really going back and reclaiming what we lost in the long journey from where we came from to what is holistic and integrated in the future. So we live in the full spectrum of human possibility.
And I can't help but, I guess, a comment on the fact that I agree with you exactly what you're saying as far as how the human condition has, for lack of a better term, devolved into this mentality, especially over the last 5,000 years, of the patriarchal, of just like you said, living to go to heaven, doing good deeds and not worrying about, particularly your life here today, as long as you get through the gates of heaven. And it just astounds me how much of that seems to be being brought back into balance, I guess, is a good way of saying it. Through whether it be through the ecological movement or through the goddess people that are involved in goddess worship now, bringing the divine feminine back into the idea and into our consciousness is very valuable, even from a psychological point of view. I remember reading, maybe 20 years ago, a book. I don't know if it might have been Carl Jung, and he spoke about, of course, the collective unconscious and, of course, divine feminine archetypes and the divine masculine archetypes, and how we have to perhaps learn to be able to balance that out. We also had a gentleman on recently, I forgot it, James Olson, talking about how the left brain and the right brain need to be brought back.
Oh, yeah, I know James.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. Wow, he's a wonderful man. And I loved what he said about, he says almost the same thing, that, we have to learn to develop that relationship between our left brain and our right brain once again, and the characteristics associated with that. I wonder, I don't know if you speak about it in your book, but what are your ideas? And I guess being a friend of James, how do you feel about the left brain, right brain concepts that he talks about?
Well, I think for holistic thinking, an integration of left brain and right brain is really essential. And, as we know, the left brain is our more rational, logical, our literary, that's what we read with when we're reading words on a page. And the right brain is more intuitive, more creative, thinks more in images than in the written word. And when we integrate them, we have a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of realization, a whole new level of consciousness. And in the same way, by reclaiming the divine feminine, we're not saying just go back to a goddess culture where women rule. We're saying this is essential to have a partnership society. That partnership between masculine and feminine, that is the parents, of the new future. We become the parents of the future, but we can only do it in partnership. And so that means not only women in government and, positions of power, but it means men and women working together and male and female value systems working together, both the linear and the cyclic, both, saying what is our objective and how do we do that in terms of relationship and keeping everybody happy? In terms of, expedience and aesthetics as well, The masculine has been, I often say that, to not put too fine a point on it, but, women have a place and men have a thing. So men have given us a marvelous world full of things. We have computers and cell phones and cars and books and, houses and roads, many, many things. But in the process, the place has been trashed.
Yeah.
And so when we come back to a sense of place being important and say, wait a minute, we have enough things for the moment. Let's clean up the place and, have these things and these places go together with a little more harmony. Then we actually have the means to create heaven on earth.
Yes, absolutely. And with that being said, I have spoken in the past how, for me, as we are seeing women coming into places of power, as we are seeing more women in places of leadership, and not necessarily in the Eastern world, I will say more so in the Western world, that, and I'm sure it's done out of necessity, but I find, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, I find that many women are masculinized in their presence, in their dress, in their, maybe perhaps even in their thinking, in terms of as they rise in the power structure, I guess the masculine power structure. Perhaps they need to play the game. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but if you agree, what can we do to enhance and really allow the women to be women as they're moving up into places of power?
I do agree completely, and I think it's a huge problem, and I think it's a huge, actually, even health problem for women, because to compete in a masculine world, women who don't have testosterone, which is kind of a driving hormone, we have to do it from our adrenal glands, and women get a lot of adrenal exhaustion trying to push themselves as hard as men are able to in order to compete in a man's world, and we have to become masculine. It's not natural to our bodies. And so, we have to balance that out and look at ways that women do leadership. They do leadership through shepherding, through creativity, through nurturing, through innovating. And they don't do leadership in the same way that men do, but they do it in ways that are really needed right now. So in a sense, it becomes part of the job of the masculine to pipe down a little bit, to slow down and give more room for the yin, for the emptiness, for the quiet, for the feeling element, if you will, as classic as that sounds,
right.
For the intuitive. And, the thing is, it takes men off the hook. And it's really of a benefit to men. They don't really lose power. They gain their life. They don't have to be in this competitive dog-eat-dog, man-eat-man world, that when we start to employ some of the more feminine values, men get to relax a little more. They get to share the power. They don't have to do everything. They don't have the responsibility on their shoulders as much. It can be shared.
I can't help but feel that perhaps if we had more of a powerful feminine presence, and I mean in the true sense of feminine, not woman acting like man, but as you just described, if we would see, perhaps if society saw something like that as an example in the places of power, like government, we wouldn't see so much conflict between the leaders and those of which are of their constituency. I believe that, like you said, these places of power, whether it be Congress, whether it be the CEO, executive tier of a corporation, has been so masculinized that those who are the constituency of that begin to feel that they're being left out. Like you said, there is no nurturing, there is no trickle down. It's always, they say it's trickle down, but there really is no trickle down. It's all, taking the profit up to the executive level. So and the reason why I bring this up is it actually was yesterday. I had a very strange dream about Blackwater. I was watching a TV program about Blackwater, And it just made me think about history as a whole and how all of these, throughout the last 5,000 years, maybe longer, most of the turmoil, I'm not going to say all, but most of the turmoil has been, the masculine playing their war games. And whether it be government, whether it be war, whether it be genocide, whether it be destruction of the environment, it just seems that it's almost as if there is an innate need for them to play these war games. And I can't help but wonder what a beautiful world it would and can be and will be when we finally allow the feminine aspects of ourselves and of life to become one with all of this.
Yeah, I think that's part of the huge shift, and we fail to see how much benefit that could have. But, even a man who tends to be on the feminine side has trouble getting anywhere in this world, So it's really, we need some of the feminization of society. We need to see the feminine as sacred. Look at how many churches and mosques and synagogues we have to a male god versus how many goddess temples can you name that you could go to?
Right.
Scarcely one.
Yeah.
And at least in the West.
I call the forest my goddess temple. And
that's right. That's right.
We don't have many of those.
Yeah, and look what's happening to the forests. They're disappearing at a huge rate. We're turning topsoil into desert at the rate of 3,400 acres per hour on this planet right now.
Just devastating. Absolutely.
It's shocking.
Now, to change gears a little bit, Anodea, you begin your book, and I love this, with the statement, evolution is a God's way of making more gods. I love that statement. It is very powerful. I believe we are kind of connecting with our divine nature. What are your feelings about us becoming gods at this time, or is that where we're headed?
I do believe that's where we're headed. If you look at evolution, it proceeds towards beings with more consciousness, more capability, more sophistication, and more power. We have more power than a mouse. A mouse is more capable than an ant. Well, you could argue that, I suppose. But, we keep evolving, and we have been, as humans, even evolving from humans that have a cerebral cortex and opposable thumbs to now, we have power, as I say, to blow up the planet or change the gene pool or alter the climate, all of which, most of which we're doing. And we also have the power for epic creation. So I think the initiatory test, as I mentioned, we're going on an initiation from our, childhood and adolescent, which is still thinking of ourselves as mortal, to a realization of our divine nature and our divine power. And the initiatory challenge really is going to be, can we create a miracle on this planet? Because that's what it's going to take. And I believe a miracle is possible. And that when we take money that is spent on the military, when we take money that's wasted, and we put it into addressing the things we need, we can create an entirely different experience in society on this planet. And that is the challenge. And that's, will I see all of that in my lifetime? Probably not. Do I see evidence of it already? Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, even the fact that we're talking right now and this is being broadcast is a miracle in a sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know how much your historical aptitude is, but I have a question, and I know this is kind of out of left field, but I just can't help but wonder. We're talking about the new paradigm or a new way of governing or a new way of a new organizing principle for community and society. I can't help but wonder, is there any evidence of, even on a small scale, I tend to lean that I always felt, and I know this is probably, how shall we say, me just being idealistic, but I've always felt it would be great to have, instead of an executive branch, but like a council of elders, and I know, I'm sure maybe in the tribal communities there were, but even on a larger scale, has there ever been any evidence of that, perhaps maybe in the agrarian cultures or anything like that? Do you know of anything other than perhaps a small tribe of a couple thousand?
Well, before the advent of writing, it's pretty hard to know exactly how they governed themselves. You know, we know what they worshipped by finding statues in the ground and piecing them together, but it's hard to know exactly how they structured their societies until the advent of writing, and writing coincided around with the start of patriarchy. So, you know, other than smaller pockets of cultures, you know, the Native Americans, for example, were ruled by, you know, elders as far as we know. And I think that, you know, the wisdom, rather than power, the wisdom traditions and organizations that have that will begin to triumph. I mean, in Bhutan, you see that they go for national happiness factor rather than the national domestic product. You know, I remember in Star Trek, one of the episodes, you know, they had a counselor on the bridge who was a major officer. So she was like one of the ones that, you know, looked to what are the people feeling and what is getting in the way, and she was an important part of the process. You know, we don't have a counselor in the House and Senate
right.
saying, "Look at you guys. What aspects are you playing out of your childhood here?" You know, we don't have wise elders, you know, but we do have them in the culture. You know, the Dalai Lama, for example. You know, people are always asking what he thinks and putting that out. He's just not part of government.
Yes, exactly. Anodea, we have about 1 minute before the next break, so I would like it if you could please take this opportunity right now to let all of our listeners know where they can find your website and where they can find a copy of your book, if they're one and the same.
Yes, they are. Well, sacredcenters.com is my main website. That's Sacred Centers, plural, CENTERS. And the website for the book is globalheartawakens.com. And you can see a 3-minute trailer that you can download and some other things, interviews, articles, and you can order a copy of the book. You can also get it on Amazon and any of the, you know, major book retailers.
Oh, wonderful. And I just out of curiosity, are you going to be speaking anywhere publicly in the near future that perhaps people could come and see you?
Well, gosh, I do it all the time. I will be cutting a shoot for Palo Yoga Center on the 26th of October, and I don't actually have a date, but I do always a free talk there, and people can look that up online. And all my events and radio interviews are listed on the Global Heart Awakens website.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to be taking a short break here at the top of the hour, and when we return, we're going to be talking with Anodea Judith some more about today's cultural challenges and what we can do to evolve past them, as long as some of our greatest strengths and everything that we can work with. See you right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show, everybody, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Anodea Judith about her wonderful new book called The Global Heart Awakens. We've been having a wonderful discussion, and right now I would like to ask Anodea from her observation. You have a wonderful intellect and of course an intuition as to looking at society as a whole, especially through your work in spirituality and in psychology, which is a wonderful a mix and a balance. So, coming from that perspective, Anodea, what concerns you the most about today's world? What concerns you the most about today's challenges?
Cultural stupidity. To not put too fine a phrase on it. You know, it's like that is more of a blockage than global warming, than economic inequalities. I mean, all these things are a result of our cultural stupidity. And by that I mean, well, some of what we're seeing in the government right now, some of what we're seeing in the way the news reports what's going on, some of what we're seeing in the way people are really entrenched in the old ways and practically willing to die to defend those old ways, even though it's obvious that they're changing, that any evolutionary process brings change. And so we really need to wise up. We need to wise up the populace and get them to awaken. And, one of the ways to do that is through media. And, of course, media, the mainstream media, is largely owned by, the corporations that are entrenched in the old ways. And fortunately, we have the internet, and we have, blog talk radio and things like what you're doing. I tell people to become radioactive. And by that, I don't mean, blowing ourselves up with bombs. I mean, get active on the radio and speak the ideas, because this is how we inseminate change and awakening. Do your meditation, go read your books, become informed.
Absolutely. And not only that, I must add, I find that, you said the word awaken, and so many people are awakening. I see it all the time. That's why I do what I do. That's why we created the Global Illumination Council. That's why we created this radio show. That's why we're on Facebook. That's why I teach classes on YouTube. But what I'm
It's why you get up in the morning.
It's why I get up in the morning. Exactly. It's my calling. It's what I do for a living, quite honestly. But I will say that I do find, and I do get concerned about this. We see so much. Somebody had posted something in the chat room here on Revolution Radio about YouTube is a double-edged sword. There's great information, but there's also a lot of bad information out there. We see a lot of disinfo. We see a lot of instead of conspiracy theory versus conspiracy fact. Yes, I believe. There's a lot of information that needs to come to the surface that's been hidden and suppressed and corrupt. But then we have the conspiracy theories of, Bernard and Anodea are reptilian, Illuminati baloney, things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, see, I have proof. The light hit his eye a certain way, and he's got double eyes.
Scales are growing on the back of his neck.
Yes. He talks funny. He's evil. So I mean. And I joke, but unfortunately, a lot of the people that are quote unquote awakening are awakening, but they're being, as far as I'm concerned, they're being distracted from the truth with a lot of this disinformation that's based in fear, and what I call it fear pornography. And what would be, well, first of all, what are your thoughts on this whole? It's become its own genre, fear porn. The media mainstream started, and then the alternative folks got a hold of it, and they're doing a great job. I'm not going to mention names, but they're out there, and they're on a lot of these alternative radio stations. So what are your ideas on fear porn, and what can people do that are awakening to kind of be on the lookout and to be able to tell, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I say watch out for the weapons of mass distraction. And the media is definitely employing weapons of mass distraction. When something important is going on, they distract our attention with something minor, what Lady Gaga has done next or something like that is just, distracting attention from the things that we really need to look at. And part of initiation, the initiation rites that adolescents go through to become adults, an essential aspect of that is, does the adolescent have the capacity to separate truth from fiction? In indigenous cultures, and I've studied initiation processes a lot, they'll have people with masks saying, do you want to pick this door or do you want to pick that door? Do you want to go this way or that way? Initiation is a series of choices. And if you choose correctly, you open to something greater and you arrive at a new place. If you choose incorrectly, and sometimes in indigenous cultures, they could actually die. And in the same way, we have the imperative right now, transform or die in this culture. And we have lots of lies going out there. And even if you look at, this dance in the government shutdown right now, the Democrats have not been willing to negotiate, where they've been giving on every point over and over and over again, until finally they're drawing the line and saying, no, we will not give up Social Security and Medicare and, benefits, and we are drawing the line, and then they're being accused of not negotiating. So lies are used to manipulate consciousness, and being able to pierce through those lies and question. I talk about in the book the process of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And if I may talk about that for a moment, it gives such a model for where we're going. The caterpillar consumes everything in sight. And what are we called in this culture right now? We're called consumers.
Yep.
And what are we told to do? We're told to consume more and more, and that's how we keep the economy going. But when we have consumed so much that we become too bloated to move, and think about, traffic jams and, places where it's just, people get weighed down by possessions and we just can't, maneuver very well, everything comes to a stop and the chrysalis forms around the caterpillar. Inside tiny cells that biologists actually call imaginal cells, they arise that are so different that the caterpillar's immune system attacks them, much as new ideas are attacked by the status quo right now, aren't they? New ideas in science, new ideas in politics, new ideas in medicine, alternative healing, alternative ways of organizing people. They're attacked by the powers that be. But these imaginal cells keep appearing anyway. And as they do, they find each other and they, in a sense, vibrate together. They go to conferences and they have meetings in their living rooms and they organize. And as they do, they override the caterpillar's immune system and they start to thrive. When that happens, the chrysalis becomes transparent. And this is my point here, that right now, information is starting to become more transparent. I mean, not only is the government spying on us right now, but we have whistleblowers that, show what the government is doing, so we get to know about it. We could see through Enron. We can find out things the government is doing that were always hidden before. Things are becoming transparent. And that means the butterfly is getting ready to emerge. As it does, the caterpillar becomes a nutritious soup for the butterfly to fill it's wings, and it literally flies off on a left wing and a right wing.
It becomes one whole, yeah.
But it's not in its left wing or right wing. It's organized along the center.
Well, wouldn't that be a beautiful thing?
And what we find in the center, in the core, is the map of the chakra system, which is something I've worked with for my whole life.
Yeah.
And the chakra system is the way that heaven and earth get connected through the inside of each and every one of us.
Now, let's talk a little bit about that. I feel that, and again, I speak of this very often on many of my shows, that one of the aspects of our how shall we say, whether it be our awakening or our consciousness evolution, is to move beyond, or at least bring into balance, our reactive nature, and then move into a proactive nature. I believe I like to use the image of a Chinese pinball machine with all the little nails, and the ball just bounces back and forth with all the nails and just keeps bouncing back and forth, and then it lands, and you get 50 points, or something like that.
Yeah.
To me, that is the reactive nature. We're constantly being bombarded by, a good example, they've closed the government, or you need to pay your electric bill today, or you need to work overtime, or it's always something, the kids need to be fed, you need to do the laundry right now, it's too much, you don't have anything left, and we become reactive instead of creators. And I've always felt that it is through the process of moving out of reactiveness into that of being, I believe you call it being the producer in your book, of producing our world, to producing our consciousness, and to creating what we're living in, what we're seeing, what we're feeling, versus the reaction or reacting and letting that dictate how we feel and how we live.
I would say it's becoming proactive.
Yeah.
The passive person is inactive.
Yeah.
Then we can become reactive, but reactive isn't necessarily acting from wisdom. It's just reacting to something. Like a teenager is busy rebelling against parents, but they're not necessarily acting from wisdom. Becoming proactive, instead of saying, well, what's going to happen here, say, what do we want to create here? That's being proactive.
What are some of the, I don't know if perhaps you would like to share maybe an exercise or at least give us some suggestions or some hints to help those who might find themselves being reactive. What are some techniques that people can use to be proactive?
Well, we all know that meditation is a technique handed down to us to kind of slow the mind and give us a little space between, having our reactions. So there's the old-fashioned thing, even in an argument, is to, take 3 deep breaths before you respond. And, I think it's to know that when we do become reactive, that there is some wound being triggered in us.
Yes.
That some childhood wound is being struck, and we are reacting really from an unconscious emotional place, is to take a little time out and say, well, what is that wound? What am I feeling right here? What are my needs? And to just take some breaths around that and then come back in from a different place and say, rather than make you wrong, I'm going to state what I really think is needed here. And so when we become reactive, more on a political level or reactive to the news, we have to keep going to the larger picture. And this is the thing, even when, things look terrible in politics and economics and things like that, I go, what is the larger purpose of this downturn? For example, during the 8 years of the Bush era, huge numbers of people joined MoveOn.org.
Yep.
Huge numbers of people donated to non-governmental organizations. In a sense, Bush pushed the organization of the new organizing principle because people were so fed up, they were so angry, they were so disenfranchised that they took more power into their own hands. So even though it was like, oh my God, my personal feeling was how many more years do we have to put up with this fool, I saw that other things were happening, that the reaction was going into something that was creative.
Absolutely. And, from my observation, I think it's fair to say now, even with Obama doing what he's doing, which it has been called the extended Bush years, I feel that, we're seeing people reacting in a positive sense. Now, don't get me wrong, the silliness of the whole birth certificate and the impeachment process, that's fine, whatever. Everybody has their own issues. But in the big picture, I'm hoping that we're seeing more people say, okay, the system is broken. This two-party paradigm has been corrupted, and there's something we need to change now. We're seeing a lot of people leaning now to, whether it be the Green Party or the Libertarian Party. Basically, if anything, between the Bush and Obama years, we're seeing people getting proactive and trying to, well, like you said, learn to take care of one another, create new paradigms, and create a new way of being. I feel that, like you said, if we can look at the big picture, Obama will be gone, in a couple of years. Hopefully we'll have a chance and we'll have an opportunity to create something better than the Bush-Obama years with the drones and the wars and the and the left-right fighting with each other like children in a playground, like you said. Jesse Ventura said something recently, and I like him, but I'm not a big fan of him, but I do keep an eye on what he says. And he said something recently. He said, the reality of it is that we need to learn to stop voting for those who are in people's pockets. And we need to come to the realization that we need to vote every single person out who is in someone's pocket. Now, again, this goes back to your idea of being educated. People don't know how to find this out. People don't bother seeing that they're voting for the Monsanto Protection Act or that they're voting to, stop helping, the Social Security or food stamps, or even the fact that they've created during the Obama administration, they created free speech zones. Free speech zone. Gee, I thought that was the whole country. But
right. I thought that was part of the Constitution.
Exactly. And of course, that was the reaction from big government against the Occupy movement. They wanted to create a free speech zone. So again, there are positive things that can come out of all of this. I like to think that we are, like you said, this is not going to happen in my lifetime. It's not going to happen in your lifetime, but we're seeing the beginnings of it. And I try to tell people, don't take it too personally. I mean, I understand if your pay's been cut or your welfare's been cut or your taxes are going way high. I understand how someone can take that personally, but to look at the big picture, we are literally the midwives. We are the ones that are helping and allowing this new way of being to come into fruition on the planet.
I'm so glad you said it that way, because another analogy I use in giving birth to a new civilization, and as any woman knows, birth is a painful process.
Oh, yes.
And it's full of contractions. And, every time we have an economic downturn, every time the gas prices go up and it's harder to get gas, we have a contraction. And that contraction, unfortunately, is painful for a lot of people. And it tends to be more painful for the poor and the disenfranchised, who are the first to be hit in an economic downturn. But, as we also know in the birth process, each contraction is forcing an opening somewhere else. And that opening is what the birth comes through. So we are giving birth to a new civilization. Every time gas prices go up, more people carpool. There's less driving that happens. There's less gas usage that goes. People find other ways. They work from home more often. This is actually a good thing. When we have an economic downturn, there's less building going on. So we're building fewer strip malls and housing projects, which are raping the environment. So some of these things need to slow down. The trouble is we are more in the contractive process right now, and we can't yet see what we're birthing. A woman goes through that. She doesn't even know, unless she's had a test, that she's giving birth to a boy or a girl. We don't know who we're giving birth to yet until that process is over, and the process is very painful.
And I think it's fair to say, I get this question a lot. Well, what are we creating? What if the new paradigm is just as corrupt as the old paradigm? Somebody had said to me the other day, we're going through a very, very volatile gubernatorial race here in Virginia. Cuccinelli and McAuliffe and Robert Saris. Robert Saris is a libertarian. McAuliffe is the 1%, corporate Democrat. And then we have Cuccinelli, who doesn't want women to have any rights or gays to have any rights, the right-wing, nut job, to put it bluntly. And what we're seeing here is, and what we're hearing is that a lot of people want to give this libertarian guy a chance. They try to get him into the debates. Well, the Democrats and the Republicans made sure he couldn't get into any of the debates. And so a lot of my, let's say my progressive Democrat friends who are, let's say a McAuliffe fan, and I don't want to get political or party alignment here. I'm just trying to be philosophical here. They asked me, they said, well, what happens if the guy gets in and he's just as corrupt as the other ones? And I've heard that not only addressed in the Virginia gubernatorial race, but as a whole, as the system changes, as we're moving into perhaps what happens if we do elect Jill Stein as president one day, and she's just as corrupt as the rest. Is my answer to that, and I'm wondering if this is along the lines of what you're trying to get across here, is that we learn by our failures, we learn by our mistakes. If the new paradigm doesn't work, we fix what's broken instead of allowing it to control everything and continue to run broken.
Mm-hmm. Well, we saw this in Egypt, where they elected a new government,
exactly.
and it turned out to be corrupt again. And so, I mean, I think that's a very excellent and aware question to ask, because this time maybe we can start to head off at the past mistakes that we've made before, and say, okay, well, how do we ensure about that? And I think part of it is this old paradigm of giving one person so much power that they could essentially take us into a nuclear war. Yeah. That is a very dangerous paradigm. And so we need something, the Constitution was actually written with checks and balances to that power. Not that we are honoring that quite the way we should, but, it was so that one person didn't have too much power, and that's ideally the nature of democracy. We're seeing some of that failure right now where even, in this government shutdown, it came down to, well, we're not going to let a vote to take place, even though we know the vote would be in the majority of allowing the government to reopen. We're going to block the vote, and one person had the power to do that. That's an erosion of democracy. But I think the more we have systems in place where no matter who we elect, they don't have absolute power, and that information itself is power. The more we get information out to people, the more people wake up. I might be naive, but I believe that if people were really accurately informed of the truth all the way down the line, and truth in advertising and truth in politics and right. truth in economics, and, we didn't have this brainwashing, people would wake up. We would respond and we would do something. And this is starting to happen, denial around global warming is starting to break. There's more and more people writing blogs about it and aware of it, and it's seeping into, other more mainstream things. But, we need truth.
Very well, absolutely. A great example, if I can share a quick anecdote. I was, what was it? Yesterday was Columbus Day. Was it yesterday? Yeah. Yeah. And I had gone, I forgot where I went to like a local convenience store to pick up like a cigarette lighter or something like that. And someone was like, oh, so what are you going to be doing for Columbus Day? You have the day off. And I said, well, no, I don't have the day off, and I don't celebrate Columbus Day. She's like, well, why don't you celebrate Columbus Day? He discovered America. I'm like, well, actually, no, he didn't. And I actually am not really one to enjoy celebrating the beginning of the death of, the indigenous cultures here in the Western world. She's like, oh, really? I didn't know that. It's like, really, in today's informational world, you didn't know that? And I'm saying that to myself. I didn't say it out loud. I'm like, yeah, well, maybe you should, go Google it, look it up, and, hopefully she will, and maybe learn something new. But it's a perfect example of people that have, like you said, are misinformed, are not getting the truth. Somebody said something beautifully yesterday. The history is written by the victors. By the winners. Yeah. And, the Indians didn't win. The Native Americans didn't win. The Spanish and the conquistadors and the Catholic Church won. So, again, going back to the truth of it all is very interesting. We actually posted, I forgot what the name of the document was, but the document that gave Columbus the right to enslave the people, given to him by the Pope or something, that, because you are a descendant of Adam and Eve, these people are savages. That was the mentality of it. And people don't even realize that exists. Mm-hmm. Things like that throughout our history. And that's just one minor example, even though it was a huge impact on our culture or the Western culture prior to us getting here. But again, going back to the truth, we have just a few more minutes on this segment. But I'm sorry, you were going to say something and make a comment?
Well, I was going to say that, when you travel and you see statues of, men on horses, we're actually worshiping war heroes. We're worshiping people who killed a lot of people. And that's in the same line of, what you're talking about in Columbus Day. And, we need to worship something else.
Yes, you can say that again. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was living in South Florida, I think it was in the early 90s, they wanted to create this huge Statue of Liberty-sized statue of Columbus. I don't know if you remember it, but it was all over the news. Maybe it was just in the local news, but I forgot who wanted to give it to us, whether it was Spain or Italy or somebody wanted to give it. And they wanted to put it off of South Beach. I guess this is when South Beach was getting very popular. They wanted everyone to look at this big Statue of Liberty-sized statue of Columbus. And I will say I was very happy that the people of South Florida were adamantly against it, and they stopped the project because of already the awareness of what he had done to the indigenous was already, I guess, because we have so many indigenous in South Florida. We have the Seminoles and the Miccosukee.
Yeah.
But people were like, oh, no, we can't have that here. But we have about 3 minutes left on this segment, and we can continue after. But let me ask you something. We always talk about love and how important it is to align with love. What does love have to do with it, and what do you mean by love?
Yes, well, I mean by love everything that we think of, both the feeling and the sentiment, but more than that as an organizing principle. And as we move, in the chakra system, which is energy centers in the body, really the bulk of my life's work, from the third chakra orientation to power to the heart chakra, it is also about opening our own hearts. It is about going to generosity and cooperation and compassion and acceptance and forgiveness. As we start to employ those values in our own life, we start to move toward a paradigm of the heart. Nonviolence, the Sanskrit name of the heart chakra, anahata, actually means not struck, not hit. So it implies nonviolence, both to ourselves and to those around us.
Absolutely. And I will say it's very easy as someone who goes through that process. I mean, we're all going through an evolutionary process. It's very easy to become nonviolent with others. I think it's twice as hard to become nonviolent with ourselves, at least in the way that we think and the way our inner dialogue, how we speak to ourselves in our mind.
Yes, absolutely. And we say things to ourselves and our own inner critic that we would never say to a friend.
Oh, you can say that again. I think we are our own worst critic. I mean, that's truly I know many people, including myself, that don't like to watch themselves in, movies or videos or documentaries. They're like, no, I can't look at it. I will be too hard on myself.
Yep.
I just do the work and I let it go, and if people like it, they like it,
That's right.
We only have a couple seconds in this segment, so let me just remind everybody, we are speaking with Anodea Judith. She has written and published a wonderful book called The Global Heart Awakens. You can find it on Amazon, and of course you can find it anywhere that good books are sold. When we come back, we're going to be discussing how we can use the chakras as a map for creating this new paradigm. So without further ado, we're going to take a very short break, and when we return, we're going to continue our discussion with Anodea Judith and the Global Heart Awakens. You're listening to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on freedomslips.com. I am Bernard Alvarez, and I am the Empowerment Director of the Global Illumination Council. If you would like to learn more about my past work or the work that we've been doing at the Global Illumination Council, you can find out at the G.I.C.org, or you can go to our new blog, Just Bernard and Company, at justbernard.com, spelled JustBernard.com. We have been having a wonderful discussion with Anodea Judith, and Anodea Judith is very well known for her work with the chakras. One of my favorite DVDs, of course, is The Illuminated Chakras, which I've watched many, many times. And in your book, Anodea, you use the map of the chakras to help us move into, I guess, the new paradigm, for lack of a better term. Can you explain to us how we can utilize the system of the chakras to move through the process into this world of awakening?
Yes, I think that it's a valuable map for, guiding our evolutionary process, both personally and collectively. It's a map I've worked with for 40 years, and as I have been teaching the chakras and writing about them and teaching all over the world, in my second major book, Eastern Body, Western Mind, I charted the chakra system onto individual childhood development and how the chakras open sequentially as we grow up. We learn to operate a body, and then we're all in our emotions, and then we learn to talk, and, we learn impulse control, and we become, we go through our terrible twos, and then we get socialized, and we go to school, and we learn to communicate, etc., and we move through the chakras into our adulthood, which is the creation of a new worldview. And then as I was writing that, I saw, well, this also applies to human history, that our first chakra, which is connected to the element earth, was the hunter-gatherer phase, where we lived very close to the earth. There was no separation. We were immersed in nature. And then the second chakra, which is water, was when we learned to put seeds in the ground and have mass-scale irrigation projects to irrigate, to bring water to the seeds in mass-scale farming so we could have more complex civilization. This was also the beginning of shipbuilding and trade. And then as we came into the third chakra about 5,000 years ago with the first empires, that was the beginning of the power paradigm, the beginning of power over in a more complex civilization yet. And that now we are moving into the heart chakra. And the heart chakra is the integrator of above and below, heaven and earth, mind and body, masculine and feminine. It brings everything into a partnership. And so in order to get there during this power paradigm, we actually repressed the lower chakras, earth, water, and fire, to develop some of the upper chakras, which was a kind of contemplation through spirituality, and then on a global level, global communication, the ability to transmit images through the internet and movies, and a global information system, which is really chakras 5, 6, and 7. Only now that we have the upper chakra capacity on a global level can we go back down and reclaim what we gave up, which was the earth, the body, the emotions, personal power, all those aspects that we kind of transcended. Now we reclaim them, and by uniting the upper chakras and the lower chakras, we come into the heart. And I think that's the destination of the journey all along.
Absolutely, and I feel that it just seems that so many of us have forgotten our hearts, and I mean that in the kindest, gentlest way that I can. We've been bruised, we've been traumatized, we've been distracted, we've been. I mean, literally, I used to say, why do we keep repeating the same thing over and over with an abusive government? It's kind of like being in an abusive relationship, but yet we keep going back to it. And I feel that we are now maybe getting to that point where we can say, wow, we have really been wounded, and now we can start opening up our heart again. I mean, so many people we see have really been damaged either through their parents or through relationships that have gone badly, broken hearts, or just even trauma, and now especially with war and terrorism and everything else that goes on in the world, that there needs to be a healing and a way to go back to the heart. What is there that you suggest or that you're seeing that people are finally finding their way back to their heart, allowing themselves to heal? What can we do, and what are we doing?
Well, I think that the word heart is coming into more and more writings, that more and more people are giving it a value. It used to be this, sentimental, wishy-washy thing, and anybody with heart was seen as weak. So part of it is just changing the values of that and realizing that it's an integrating and organizing principle. To come into our own hearts is to come back first into connection with the self. What's going on in my own heart? The heart has an intelligence that, is beyond the logic of the mind. And the heart's intelligence is something that leans towards wholeness, that leans towards coherence. The Institute of Heart Math, for example, has done a lot of research on the heart, and that when we take those, that 18-inch journey from the head to the heart, which might be the longest journey we take in our life, and we drop down to just listening to the heart, to imagining a positive experience and breathing into the heart, that the whole electromagnetic field of the nervous system goes into a more coherent frequency, meaning the heart and brain are working together. And when that happens, that extends beyond the body. The heart's electromagnetic field is 5,000 times stronger than the field of the brain. And so we connect with each other within that field. So if I'm in that coherence and you're in that coherence, the field is magnified. And so what the Institute of Heart Math is trying to do is get a global coherence initiative, more people to practice their simple heart freeze technique to come into coherence. And if they get enough people doing that, they believe it actually will influence a change in current events.
And I feel we've already seen that. Many times over, we've been very lucky enough to see something like that go on, whether it be, the 1,000 monks meditating on peace or the 2012 meditations or anything like that. I feel that we are already seeing that being put into practice and also are being able to experience the outcomes of something like that. One of my greatest philosophies that I live by is I feel that even though we are seeing so much turmoil in the world outside of us, even though we may be working toward external change, so let's say as an activist or an advocate or as an NGO or nonprofit or something to that effect, that we also must do the inner work. That, just because you've gotten rid of, let's say, the crack house on the corner, it doesn't mean it's not going to come back. That we need to as well work on the way that we are perceiving our world, that we are perceiving ourselves, and literally do our best to connect with what I call the higher self, the holy guardian angel, source, whatever it is that we're talking about, through the practices of meditation or yoga or something like that. What is your feeling on the idea that I just said of we can change the outside, but we must also create the balance of changing the inside? How do we create that?
Well, the heart begins at home, as we know, and home in the very self. So I think that part of our maturing as human species is to do our own inner work. And there's many aspects of that work. One is healing. As a former psychotherapist, I know for a fact from all the years I sat in that chair that when people do a piece of their own healing, the heart naturally begins to awaken. It's like the sun comes out again. Oh, my goodness, I can love again. Oh, I feel whole again. I'm finding my joy again. I mean, I heard that over and over as I help people reclaim rejected aspects of themselves, heal old wounds. So doing our healing work, whether we go to a psychotherapist or we join a women's group or a men's group or we take workshops or however we do it, is an essential process of, really growing up. Another aspect is practices. I believe that we are being called to play in a grand symphony of creation together. And if we use that analogy, anybody that plays in a symphony has to go home and practice at home.
Yeah.
They practice their instrument in order to be able to play well with others. So practices like yoga, meditation, martial arts, contemplation, reflective thinking, whatever the practice is, and I'm not saying there needs to be any particular one or dictating which practice someone chooses, but these practices have been handed down to us by our ancestors to help humanity mature, to help us grow up, to help us heal our wounds and come to greater consciousness. And in order to play in this grand symphony, we need to do those practices at home to help evolve our consciousness.
Yes, absolutely. And if I may share something on a personal note, we had Tony Burrows on several months ago, and I love the concept of the power of intention. And for me, what I got out of it was our language. Instead of saying, I wish this war would end, we'd say, war is over. Or I wish they wouldn't spray chemtrails. We'd say, I intend to have a clear sky. You know, it's just the way that the language that we're using. And I go back to that inner dialogue aspect that not many of us are very good at yet, but I feel it's a part of the process of intending and using the correct language. A teacher of mine many years ago said to me, your word is your wand, meaning like a magical wand. You know? And
beautiful.
what you say comes into creation. And not only what you say, but the words you think come into creation. And I feel that is a very intricate aspect of this because, you know, I don't want to get into the whole law of attraction thing because I believe it's one of many, many laws. But the reality is that our thoughts are energy. And the way that we think and the words that we think, we don't realize that. We just let our brains run amok. As another wonderful teacher, Sogyal Rinpoche, says, you know, we all have monkey mind. And it's getting to, you know, get the monkey off the branches, and you are the one that chooses where the mind goes. It's where we need to be headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we even say a war on poverty and a war on drugs, and we go to a doctor and says, we got to kill those germs. You know, those are not healing models. And yes, we have to do something about poverty, but the war on it is not the way to do it. And to be solution-oriented, you know, not problem-oriented, but solution-oriented. Because I believe, along with the, you know, power of intention, what we focus on, we get more of. And so we need to focus on what we're creating. We need to focus on the vision of where we're going. We need to focus on what's positive and what's possible. Not to the point of denial, however.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other danger of positive thinking.
Yeah, very much so.
It can lead to denial. And so, you know, we need to be honest and communicate about the things that are truly wrong and need to be seen, but we need to balance that with a vision of the future.
Hear, hear. And I'm glad you brought that up because I do feel it's a double-edged sword. The idea of trying to always be how shall I say? Always trying to be positive, always trying to be the optimist. I am the my friends say I'm annoyingly optimistic. However, I can get annoyingly angry when I see injustice or, you know, something that I feel is unfair toward humanity, like the destruction of the rainforest or war, or, you know, the polluting of the waters or the fluoridation of water without our consent. You know, things like this get me very frustrated, and I do share my aggravation publicly, but at the same time, I also feel that we need to always look for the best in everything, be grateful for everything that we do have. We may not have it all yet as far as a global culture, but we're getting there, and we have so much more to enjoy and to see if we allow ourselves. But again, going back to that aspect of what you said of moving into denial, I've also been attacked by many in the metaphysical consciousness, law of attraction movement for being very negative. How can you talk about war? How can you talk about rape? How can you talk about, well, because this is going on. Good example, what is it? I believe it's 1/4 of all women in the United States are still being raped. I mean, that's a horrible percentage. You know,
it's a horrible figure.
Yeah. And that's something that we need to pay, not give all of our attention to and be brought down by it, but be aware and perhaps take action or advocacy to do something about it. So how do we balance that out? Here's a good question, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to lose my train of thought. When we see something like that, and again, you know, rape is I hate to say that I know many, many women who have been raped. Many of my friends, my female friends, have been raped. And it's not that they're poor. It's not that they're beautiful. It's not that they're young. It's not that they're old. Many women I know have been raped. And it's
myself included.
Oh, okay. Very well, not very good, but thank you for being honest. It's an ugly situation, but when we're dealing with an ugly situation like that, how can we maintain balance in addressing something like that?
Well, we need to maintain balance by, putting out a value of women's sexuality as sacred, and giving women permission to own their own bodies, and enlightening the male population, and also digging into the deeper cause of things like rape. Because, what happened a long time ago is sexuality was taken away. It was made evil. It was forbidden. And sexuality is a natural avenue for human connection, for human pleasure, for men and women to create partnership. And when sexuality is taken away, when something natural is taken away, it erodes and it goes underground with rape and child molestation and pornography and billions of dollars worth of advertising telling us to be sexy even though we're not supposed to have sex. So we have this really perverted values around sexuality that need a great deal of cleanup, and that rape is the hunger of the masculine for the lost feminine in its most basic, and that hunger is so great that it will steal it, take it from where it doesn't have a right,
Mm-hmm.
And so the more we replace those values, the more we allow sexuality out of the closet. I mean, whose idea was it to cover up breasts? What a stupid idea. Right. They're beautiful things that everybody wants to see.
Yeah.
At least men do,
Yeah.
And so, of course, when men are not allowed to see breasts very often, they're going to go to magazines to see it. And then they're, going to be fantasizing about women that aren't real. And so, it's a very complicated issue. And with all of the issues, what we have to do is get to the root of it. The symptom is only the indication of a deeper disease.
And that's exactly how I feel. I believe it's a symptom. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that, and I've spoken of this in the past, that we have become so sexually repressed. You can't talk about sexuality. We can't talk about whether it be heterosexuality, bisexuality, homosexuality, pansexuality, the beautifulness of enjoying another's passion. Of course, with permission, mutual enjoyment, mutual respect, mutual love. That it just seems that we've just gone out of our way to not give ourselves permission. I got to tell you, really, we only have a couple of minutes. I'll do it very quickly. I was banned from Facebook because someone had posted a picture on my wall of a light bulb in a long hallway, and it looked like a woman in her panties. And Facebook literally banned me for a month because of that picture.
Wow.
And I didn't even post it.
Yeah. Well, you could go to the movies and you would sit through 20 minutes of violent trailers. And yet, if a breast slips out of a dress in the Emmy Awards, it's all over the news.
Yeah, you never hear the end of it. You never hear the end of it. So, anyway, we've only got about 1 minute left. We got about 1 minute. What would be your message to humanity right now? What is the one thing you would like to tell the world?
What I would like to tell the world is that our adulthood is looming ahead and calling us toward such a glorious possibility for civilization, that we are here to create heaven on earth, and that we can each do that in our own lives. How do we make our relationship more heavenly? How do we make our home more heavenly, our business, and then take that out into the community? How do we co-create that together?
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And again, Anodea Judith, her book is The Global Heart Awakens. Your website one more time, Anodea?
sacredcenters.com and globalheartawakens.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we are going to have Tom Lesher, Pacho, the astrologer. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week. And thank you once again, Anodea. It was such a pleasure. There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.